Discuss today's top stories, including the Chinese government paying families $500 a year per baby to help with the country's population decline. I'm Ernie Manous.
And I'm Celeste Diaz-Sherman. We'll also talk with the Baker Institute's Tony Payan, who will break down how the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, is on track to become the largest federal law enforcement agency.
And I'm Frank Billingsley. Plus, we'll also speak with the Texas Tribune's Colleen DeGuzman, who will tell us about the moves the Trump administration has made to remove bond hearings for migrants.
And as Ernie, Frank, and I discuss the top headlines of the day, we want your thoughts, questions, and concerns. Give us a call or send us a text at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The gunman who killed 4 people in a Manhattan office building yesterday before he took his own life apparently had a grievance with the National Football League. Here's New York City Mayor Eric Adams.
We have reason to believe that he was focused on the NFL agency that was located in the building.
But the mayor tells MSNBC today the suspect got on the wrong elevator. Investigators disclosed they'd found a rambling note on the suspect's body. He appeared to blame the NFL for repeated brain trauma. The gunman played high school football some 20 years earlier in California. Police say the Las Vegas resident had a history of mental illness. The Gaza Strip is experiencing the, quote, worst-case scenario of famine. The United Nations-backed coalition issued that alert this morning, but stopped short of issuing a formal famine declaration. NPR's Emily Fang brings us that story from Tel Aviv.
The alert by the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, or IPC, warns that, quote, widespread starvation, malnutrition, and disease are driving a rise in hunger-related deaths. The World Health Organization says more than 60 people died of malnutrition in July alone, more than 20 of them children under 5 years old. For hunger to reach the famine threshold on the IPC, the panel says it found at least 30% of children experiencing acute malnutrition. The panel used data collected up to 4 days ago, before Israel started letting in more food to Gaza. So the group said a new analysis would be conducted without delay and updated data. Israeli officials have denied there is starvation in Gaza and have blamed Hamas for stoking chaos in aid distribution. Emily Fang, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
President Trump's lawyers want to depose Rupert Murdoch. Trump's suing the 94-year-old media mogul, the Wall Street Journal's parent company, and 2 of the paper's reporters for libel. Here's NPR's David Folkenflik.
The 2 titans of the American right have been political allies for the past decade. Murdoch's Fox News, the New York Post, and the Journal's editorial pages have largely served as pillars of support for Trump. Now Trump wants a judge to give Murdoch just 2 weeks to be deposed, saying it's uncertain whether he would show up at a trial. Trump says he warned Murdoch not to publish a story saying Trump sent a bawdy birthday message 2 decades ago to the late Jeffrey Epstein. Trump says he did not draw or send such a note. Outside lawyers say Trump's case is flimsy, yet he has won big settlements from the parent companies of ABC, CBS, Facebook, and X for suits that were similarly deemed as weak. Now Trump is putting his former ally Murdoch on notice, too. David Folkenflik, NPR News.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down more than 200 points. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Alexandra Hart. A suspect in recent fires at Memorial Park is under arrest. Since last October, the Houston Fire Department investigated 15 grass fires throughout the area. Houston Fire Chief Thomas Munoz says no structures were damaged as a result, only vegetation. He says 45-year-old Dustin Schlane is the suspect.
He did confess to setting some multiple fires in the area. He is currently in the Harris County Jail charged with 2 counts of arson felony, and he is being held on a $50,000 bond.
Munoz says there have been no reports of additional fires at the park since the arrest. A major expansion of the Ben Taub Level 1 trauma facility in the Texas Medical Center will include the seizure of almost 9 acres of Herman Park. News 88.7's Sarah Grunow reports.
The 3 parcels of the park that could be taken for the hospital expansion are located at the corner of Cambridge and Lamar Fleming Streets in the medical center. Kara Lambright, the Herman Park Conservancy president, said the organization supports the hospital expansion, but, quote, remains mindful of what the community stands to lose.
It's also important to acknowledge that this is not the first time Herman Park land has been ceded to hospital development. The current Bentop Hospital site itself was once part of the park.
Dr. Esmail Porsa, the CEO of Harris Health, said that the area represents only 2% of the total park land. He said the expansion is crucial because the hospital continues to operate above its capacity. I'm Sarah Gruno, News 88.7.
A Harris County Sheriff's Office detention officer has been arrested after pointing a gun at an alleged shoplifter. 41-year-old Roger Johnson is charged with aggravated assault. Tomball police say that Johnson got into an altercation at an Academy Sports and Outdoors store, accusing another person of shoplifting. Multiple outlets report that he says he felt threatened after allegedly trying to take down the supposed shoplifter to the ground, and that's when he pulled his gun. Surveillance footage shows that the woman was not shoplifting. A judge set bail at $10,000. I'm Alexandra Hart, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. As a fiduciary, Fisher Investments is obligated to act in their client's best interest. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss. This is NPR.
Live from the University of Houston, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Welcome back. It's Tuesday, July 29th.
What is tickling you, Frank?
Yeah, you want to know what?
What?
So we have a lot of really important subjects to cover.
Yes.
And I walked in, and what is Ernie saying? I can't believe Shipley's got sold.
That is a big story. We're going to get our headlines
for Houstonians, yes.
My
So
bigger
funny.
concern about that is we want to talk about Shipley's, and there's no Shipley's Donuts here.
I know. How will we know
I love
what we're
a good
talking
Shipley's
about
donuts.
if we're not eating them?
Donuts.
We eat them a lot here, though.
We do.
There's a lot. People bring them in a
Not
lot.
today.
I grew up on Krispy Kreme. And Krispy Kreme was in Birmingham when I was a boy.
Mm-hmm.
And the sororities in Birmingham used to have a fundraiser by bringing Shipley's boxes to the door on Saturday mornings.
Shipley's or Krispy Kreme?
$1 Krispy Kreme. Sorry, $1 a box. $1 a box for Krispy Kremes. Well, I mean, of course you had to get them, right?
Yeah.
So I grew up on Krispy Kreme. So it was hard for me to move. I like Shipley's, but it was hard for me to make that transition.
If you're
So many
wondering, I
thoughts.
think we have totally thrown out our topics of the day, and Frank's gone rogue, and we're already in the Shipley's
I had so many
story.
thoughts. Well, I grew up eating breakfast tacos. I wasn't a big donut. I grew up in South Texas. Like breakfast, there's a trend. Breakfast tacos and avocado toast and all these things, these types of food became very trendy. In South Texas, we grew up on that. We didn't do donuts. We didn't do sweets for breakfast.
I'm going to stop both of you people right there, and I'm going to pull the story. Here we go. We're jumping into the headlines way ahead. We'll come back. We'll fix things afterwards. But right now, Shipley's Donuts, since we were already talking about it, we're already there.
Okay.
Shipley's Donuts, one of Houston's most beloved homegrown brands, has a new owner. Levine Lichtman Capital Partners, or LLCP, is marking a new chapter for the nearly 90-year-old company known for its fresh, made-in-house donuts, kolaches, and coffee. Founded in 1936, 1 year after my mom was founded, and based in Houston, Shipley's has grown into one of the nation's largest donut franchises. I did not know that, with more than 375 stores operating in 14 states. In recent years, the company has more than doubled system-wide sales and experienced 18 consecutive quarters of same-store store sales growth. According to a new release, Shipley's has expanded into new markets, launched new marketing cooperatives, and developed new products, opened a new corporate headquarters, on and on and on. Shipley's has long held a special place for Houston food culture, serving up its signature treats to generations of fans. The sale to LLCP marks another milestone in the company's transformation from a family-owned Texas institution to a nationally recognized franchise.
So this isn't the first time, like the Shipley family.
But it was sold from a company to
sold
another
in
company.
2021,
Yeah.
I believe. Lawrence Shipley Sr. opened it, like you were saying, back in 1936.
Yep.
And so this isn't like the first
Right, it's not
private
like it
equity
just
firm.
left
I
the
think
family.
the difference is the private equity firm that originally owned it was in Austin. This one is now California.
Someone's done her
based.
donut research today.
Not enough. I didn't try any.
I know. Well, if you are concerned that Shipley's will change and Houston will lose one of its signature brands, give us a call, 713-440-8870. Or if you've got a Shipley's donut story you want to share with us, I've got some good donut stories.
Whataburger. We went through this with Whataburger when it was sold to that Chicago outfit. Oh, my God, what's going to happen? It's fine.
still Whataburger.
Hasn't changed a bit.
It's
and this is going to
delicious.
change anything either. You know how much it sold for?
How much?
$400 million.
Shipley's or Whataburger?
Shipley's.
400 million?
But there's a lot of holes with this sale. But
Wait. The
It
sale,
$400 million.
this last one?
Yes,
This is
$400
most
million.
recent. Wow.
The one that just went through. If it was my donut shop, I'd sell it too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's, again, I don't know. For me, it's a big deal for Houstonians because of what I understand this new private equity firm is looking to do. And it's looking to bring AI into the ordering so somebody could message and say, Shipley's, I'm going to have a church gathering in the morning at breakfast and I'm going to feed 25 people and then it'll give you, information. I want a good old-fashioned donut shop. Don't California my donuts.
So here's my favorite Shipley's donut story. There's a Shipley's on, is it Maine up in the Heights up there by Spanish Flour and all that? I think that's Maine, isn't that?
Voodoo Donuts? Or Shipley's?
No, Shipley's.
Oh.
Anyway, and at midnight, they make fresh donuts. And you can drive through their drive-through and get their fresh donuts right out of the oil. They're so good right when you get it. Shipley's has like this amazing window right when they're fresh, and you bite into them and they're kind of like a cloud of sugar. Just fabulous, fresh out of the oil. So we always try and go by there if we're up in the Heights late at night. But you drive up and it's a little drive-through window. And you get there and you hit the bell, whatever, and the woman comes to the window and she opens the window and she used to. I don't know if she's still there anymore. She'd say, "Yeah?" And you'd say, "I'd like a donut." And she would say, "A donut?" And every time she says that with that question mark implied, I think, what else do you sell? Why do you think I'm here? How can that surprise you? And then I say, "Yes, a donut. Do you have any fresh?" "I'll see." And she closes the window. She and one other man are the only two people working there, and it's only so big, and she doesn't know if they just made donuts or not. So she'll wander over, and then she'll come back to the window, and she'll say, "We got them."
We got them.
So then I order my dozen.
I like that.
I get my dozen donuts. I pay. I pull over. I eat one first before I even leave because it's so fresh.
Yeah.
Love a donut.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Good for Shipley's. They made a lot of money.
Well,
And
yeah,
they're
and
they're
the
still
other-
going to be here.
the
They're going to
other-
go from 18 states to the whole country.
Right, but the other part that I also read about, this acquisition is going to be that this new private equity firm is looking also to update their beverage
Well, then when I pull up to the window,
I have a
and I
real
say,
problem with
Like
that.
fancy coffee?
Like coffees. Like they're gonna basically make Shipley's, and they're gonna try to compete. This is what I think. They're gonna try to compete with like a Dunkin' Donuts.
Right.
We're gonna now start selling
But now that
cool
woman-
coffees, and we're gonna start selling. And I'm like, stick to the donuts.
But that woman that works there now, when I say I want a donut, and she says a donut, it'll make sense. I hope she lasts long enough. That almost made you do a spit take on that one.
I'll always be
Anyway,
a Krispy Kreme guy. Sorry.
Would you stop?
I'm
Don't
not-
talk Krispy Kreme in a Shipley's world.
I'm
My-
sorry.
my-
I just will be.
My uncle, so I didn't grow up eating Shipley's, but my family that lived in Houston, and this is why I think this is a big deal, significant for Houstonians, is that my uncle, my tío Juanito, he rest in peace, he lived here in Houston, and he would go get Shipley's every time we visited. And, it was just such a treat. And so I think that, I love Shipley's.
Well, I will say that your British computer guy, known as my British computer guy, he prefers Krispy Kreme. Shipley Donuts just seem too dense. Okay, my British computer guy, I want to let you know. Go and get them when they're fresh out of the oil, and they are like clouds. So you want to try it that way. You will not believe that they are too dense.
I don't know if you're still my British computer guy after that comment.
Yeah. Anyway, so give us your Shipley stories. Share them with us, 713-440-8870, or email us, talk@hellohouston.org. Also cleaning up a few things around here. About a week ago or so, when we first found out about the sale, or the sale, now I'm talking Shipley's language, of the cutting of funding for PBS, we had a phone call that came in of a dad whose son was raising money and had raised about $5 at that time to help support PBS because he loved PBS. And we all said, well, get him out there, raise more money, give us a call, let us know how he did. And then we've gotten a lot of calls. A lot of people are interested in whatever happened to that young boy who was out there so wanted to save his PBS. Well, actually, the dad's on the phone with us. Eric is with us right now. Hello there, sir.
Hi, good morning.
Well, your son made quite an impression on us when you first sent us the message about your son wanting to save his PBS. Can you tell us Celeste?
Well, I was going to say, and I want to make sure that we say this. We want to thank your son, and we want to thank you also. And it's not necessarily about the money, but it's about the intention that we just really,
hold your tongue
really
until we
appreciate
find out how much money he got.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that before we start talking dollars here,
Eric,
baby.
Before we get into it too much, tell us the story of how this all started, what your son said to you, what he had seen, what he was worried about.
So this is how it all started, and before the rescinding of the bill passed, there was a bulletin somewhere he saw it on PBS media where PBS was in danger of going away, and he was very motivated to raise money to help PBS Kids and PBS stay on the air. And he got his, he went around the household first. He got like $5, but then he went to his neighbors because he's really passionate about PBS, and he wants to save the PBS Kids programming for all the kids.
And he's 10 years old, correct?
Yes.
Aww.
What's his favorite show?
My favorite show is Wally Crack.
Well, that's one of ours, too, in my household.
Nice.
I love that.
Hello, young man. What's your name? We know your dad's Eric. What's your name?
Eric.
You're Eric also.
Eric. Let me guess, Eric Jr. So, Eric, how much did you raise?
$150.
Wow.
115 or 150?
$150.
$150.
We are so proud of you, Eric. Now, I'm going to remind my compatriots here on the panel, we all agreed we would match whatever you raised. So we're each going to donate an additional to whatever we already give to Houston Public Media. Another $150 from each of us, which is $450, added with yours is $600. Thanks to your help, we've already raised $600 because of your initiative, Eric, and that's going to help preserve your PBS Kids and keep that programming for you. How does that make you feel?
Good, and thank you.
No, thank you. You did a great job. And I want to put this out to everybody who's listening right now. I know we're not set up and we're not in campaign right now.
We're not even in our script right now.
We're off in the wild. Anybody who wants to also give $150 in Eric's name toward this child's fund to save his children's programming, but also, Eric, I understand it's not just the programming. You like going online and playing the games at PBS Kids and all of that, correct? Oh,
I think we
he may
lost
not be
him.
with us.
Yeah.
Okay, so
That was
if you
really,
want,
Did Eric leave
cool.
us?
I think Eric did leave
I wanted
us.
to invite him to come up and give us some money. I want to see the money, Eric.
Yeah.
Eric, you need to call us
Show
back.
me the money. No, yeah, that was really cool. And
Frank's not parting with his 150 till he
You
sees
want to see
Eric.
my 150? I want to see your 150. Okay, but you know what I was going to say to Eric at 10 years old? I think that he'll find that doing for other people and helping other people will bring him a lot of joy in his life, and apparently it already has.
Absolutely.
But they always say the happiest people are the ones that do for others.
Absolutely.
And I think Eric's already teaching us all of that.
It's a lesson, and it's one of those things where we just continue to feel that support from our community. And it is hard. It is absolutely hard. And we all feel it within our own community here at Houston Public Media. And so when you have a child out there, you know, my kids watch PBS Kids. That's pretty much all my kids watch.
Right.
And so it's nice to know that our programming makes an impact.
And when we were doing our fund, and I think we focused on what the adults would lose, like the politics and the news and the news and all things considered, and all of those things that we focus on as adults. And we didn't focus probably a lot on what your kids are going to lose without PBS.
The educational programming, and
we said educational programming, but they don't think of it as educational programming.
No.
They think of it as my TV.
Absolutely.
That's my show.
Their shows.
I count on it.
And to just recap so everyone's following what in the world we're talking about. So we went into the campaign after the federal funding was cut to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And this little guy, Eric, he heard about what was going on, 10 years old, and wanted to do something about it and pulled together his money and went to his dad and said, I've got $5. How can I help? What else can I do? And his dad wrote to us and asked us, what can he do? And we encouraged him to go out and raise as much as he could, and we would match it. And he went and raised $150. So now we're going to match that $150, and we're inviting you to match that $150 too. Just, give us a call at our number at 713-440-8870, or even easier, you can go online to houstonpublicmedia.org/donate and make that $150 donation. And in the comment, mention this is for Eric.
Well, you know, Eric is still on the phone, and Eric wants to come up and present the money. Eric, are you there?
We're here.
Okay, so I want you to work with our producer to find a time to come up in this week, hopefully, and we can set aside our own little fundraiser. And when Eric is here presenting our money, we'll get with Adriana, who's in charge of such things, and we'll say, look, we're going to have a little 20-minute fundraiser and talk to Eric and his dad about how this all happened and what it's all about. And our viewers and listeners can specifically match the $150 that Eric raised for us.
Eric, you up for that?
Oh, of course, yes.
All right,
Awesome.
Talk with our producer, set that up. If you want to donate, if you're inspired right now and don't want to wait for our little gathering here on the show, go to houstonpublicmedia.org/donate. And that's just one of those great feel-good stories. Thank you, Eric, and we'll see you here in studio.
And I think we're in a time where we have to look for those moments.
Yeah.
There is a lot of not feel-good stories happening. And so when we have that moment, this is where we want to take those moments and give our thanks and show our gratitude. And we often say, this programming can go away. Again, I've said this many times. Y'all know I grew up in Brownsville, Texas, right on the border. My parents were avid NPR listeners, and I grew up on PBS programming. And it is no longer offered in South Texas. Mm-hmm. You can no longer get that programming down there. And
we're going to see a lot of things go away.
And in that area, we know that is one of an area where this type of information is needed because it's right on the border. A lot of the policy, a lot of the information affects the people that need unbiased, honest journalism.
Yeah.
We're going to get Eric up here.
Yep. So Eric's going to come
up.
But until then, please go to houstonpublicmedia.org/donate. Do a $150 donation, and wherever you can note it or however that works there, please mention Eric in it, and that'll be nice. We were talking about Shipley, something else that's close and dear to our heart. We got a couple calls on that. Let's grab them quick, and then we'll move on with the show. 713-440-8870. David, you're on the line. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I'm with you, Ernie. I grew up on Shipley's, and Shipley's are just totally different than those other donuts from other parts of the country. Shipley's are like hot and soft and airy and sugary, and you can eat 3 or 4 of them before you even know it.
Oh, that's so true, David.
They're kind of like beignets to me. They're just so sugary and light.
Yeah, but the trick is you got to get them fresh and hot, and they are like magic.
Warm and yummy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
David,
you have to go to a store that makes them multiple times per day, because sometimes some of these stores only make them once in the morning and then they're cold the rest of the afternoon or whatever.
Right.
Yep.
Not Krispy Kreme.
Thanks.
Creams are greasy and cold.
Yes.
Ooh, David, we got a war going on.
All right.
We're in a donut war.
Thanks for calling, David. Let's go to Shelley. Shelley, are you on the line?
I am.
Hi, Shelley. Welcome to Hello Houston. What's your comment?
Hi, yes. I grew up in Sharpstown way back before dinosaurs walked the earth. And we have 4 children in the family, and every Sunday morning my mother would go to Shipley's on this and buy 1 dozen Shipley's donuts. And she would always eat one on the way home. So when we got home with that 11 donuts, there was a huge fight over which child would only get 2 donuts. Because the other 3 would get 3. And it was enormous Sunday morning fight.
But Shelley, that's why they invented a baker's dozen, which has 13 in it. So she could have eaten one and you guys would have never known. We should get Shipley's to include a baker's dozen so that you can have one on the way and your family won't
You have
know.
to change the box, and that's a problem.
No, you eat it so fast, they just give you one in a napkin and then the 12 in the box.
Shelley, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. We're getting a whole lot of texts about that. We'll read those in a little bit, but we went just so long.
And we do have some really important information and news that we want to get to. So coming up on Hello Houston, the Baker Institute's Tony Payan will break down why Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or also known as ICE, is now on track to become the largest federal law enforcement agency. This is News 88.7. Stay with us.
Hello, I'm Josh Adams, General Manager of Houston Public Media. This station just lost $2.2 million in federal support annually. To keep our station strong, we've launched the Resiliency Fund, powered by community members just like you. Your support will help bridge the funding gap and ensure these programs remain free and accessible to everyone. If public media and this station matter to you, now is the time to act. Support the Resiliency Fund today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
You can hear The Daily tonight at 7.
Cuts to funding won't silence this station, but they do make your support more vital than ever.
Houston Public Media brings you facts, local, national, and global, free to everyone. But it's your support that makes it possible. Call 888-909-0887.
In a changing media landscape, you are the reason we're on the air. Keep it local. Keep it free.
Give now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Houston Public Works. Water running into the street or sidewalks is avoidable. Checking sprinkler heads and fixing leaks will prevent unnecessary runoff. Every drop counts. More at givewaterabreak.org. Support for Houston Public Media comes from CenterPoint Energy, which has completed installing 26,000 poles and trimming vegetation for more than 6,000 miles of power lines, all part of their plan to build a resilient coastal grid for the hurricane season.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now back to Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
With the recent passage of the sweeping One Big Beautiful Bill, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, is now on track to become the largest federal law enforcement agency in the United States, surpassing even the FBI in both funding and personnel. Supporters say it's a bold step towards securing the border. Critics warn it could drastically reshape the way immigration is enforced across the country. To help us break down what this means for immigration policy and the U.S.-Mexico relations, we're joined by Tony Payan, the Claudio X. Gonzalez Fellow in U.S.-Mexico Studies at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. Tony, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Ernie. A pleasure to be with you guys.
And if you have any questions for Tony Payan, you can give us a call at 713-440-8870. Now, Tony, anti-immigration hardliners, I mean, they see this as a major victory. But is there any way that this potentially could backfire, even on supporters and have this potential to become a kind of domestic army right here in the U.S.?
That's a very good question. I think, in the past, ever since I was a graduate student, I certainly took a look at law enforcement. My dissertation was on cops, soldiers, and diplomats, which was essentially looking at law enforcement in the war on drugs. So going back to the 1990s, I've been very aware of the way that there's always a mission creep. Agencies sort of change their mission bit by bit as they solve a problem. They certainly look for other missions. And I think there's a lot of danger in a very rapid growth by ICE. Some of the specific dangers of explosive growth, and we've seen it in the Border Patrol at the border after September 11th, I think, when the Border Patrol went from about 9,000 agents to about 19,000. They grew very quickly. And it's not just about the numbers. We have to remember that after a while, they're beginning to sort of, scraping the bottom of the barrel, hiring people with rather questionable judgment and moral character, low training, of course, in law and the use of weapons and rights, due process rights and such. And there is certainly an opportunity for a lack of accountability, racial profiling, especially if ICE begins to recruit with all these salaries. They're offering $100,000, $120,000 salaries to begin. If they begin to recruit some of the MAGA ideological folks that get in there and that don't really care that much. They don't have the right training to be law enforcement. They don't care about relationships with the community, and they begin to take shortcuts. I mean, if you think about the Hispanic and the immigrant population, we got about 65 million Hispanics in the country, and we got about 10.7 million undocumented. If you start taking a shortcut, i.e. racial profiling to sort of identify who's an immigrant and who's not, who's a U.S. citizen and who's not, then there's a lot of room for error. And we've seen the horror stories of abuse. So I would be very, very cautious with an explosive growth of ICE. There's a lot of room for mistakes, error, mistreatment of people who really are U.S. citizens. And so,
Sir,
I think there's danger here.
Did I read correctly that some ICE officers are being given the role of judge and jury right when they make an arrest?
Absolutely. We see story after story of U.S. citizens that they're definitely profiling. It's a tough time, I think, to be brown and be walking in the streets because, you may not be dressed well, and then they're driving around, they're going to specific places. We've seen stories of construction sites where they just simply go in there. There's 120 workers in there, and then they arrest them all, and then they try to figure out who's a citizen or not. We've seen that some of them have actually presented their documents, their legal residents, permanent residents, or there's U.S. citizens, U.S.-born individuals, and yet they're all taken away. We'll arrest you, we'll detain you now, we'll figure out who you are later. We've seen that the president has toyed with a potential deportation of citizens. So this is getting out of hand, and I think the polls are beginning to show that many Americans are beginning to think that this is really abusive and that the Trump administration is overreaching, and I think ICE will pay a price for that. We have to be very careful with the way we do law enforcement. We're just terrorizing our communities, and if we add many more agents without the proper vetting, the right screening, I think we're going to see a lot more of these mistakes.
We talk about the speed and the quality of people that they're recruiting and the training and all of that. I am curious, though, on the other side of it all, was this growth necessary, regardless of how they're picking them now? They could maybe be doing it better. But is it something we needed to increase at this level?
Well, evidently that's debatable. There are folks who think so. I don't believe so. If I look, I've also studied immigration for many, many years, 2.5 decades, and I can tell you that the number of undocumented people in the country essentially stabilized in around, I think, 2007, and it actually decreased after the 2008 2009 financial crisis, the numbers actually went down from 12.5 million to about 10.7 million. It may be a little bit more today because maybe some folks were allowed in the United States with a notice to appear, an NTA, in the last few years, and then they didn't show up in court. So the numbers may be up a little bit. But even then, even if you concede that there's 12, 13 million people, I don't think it's warranted. I think that issue was very much under control. We had a border crisis. We had an asylum crisis at the border, but I don't think we had a crisis of undocumented residents in the United States, and they certainly were not a public security and safety threat. We know that the literature shows over and over that most migrants, even undocumented migrants, are very law-abiding. This is an administrative violation of the law. It's not a criminal violation to be in the United States without papers. So none of this was really necessary. This is about politics. This is about the political theory. This is about a promise that president made to his political base, and he's trying to fulfill that. And we know who's driving this. One particular individual, Stephen Miller from California, who has expressed misgivings about Hispanic presence all the way back to high school. We know what his biography is, and obviously this is the individual that's today fully in charge of the immigration policy in the Trump administration.
All of these folks, do you know where they're being deployed? Is this just border, or are we talking about infiltrating the entire country across as Celeste alluded to, a military force within our country?
Well, they operate at about 400 points in the country. What I'm concerned about is the fact that if you give these guys $45 billion to build a detention system, which is what the big, beautiful bill does, and then you give them $30 billion additional dollars to hire people on a very fast pace with all the dangers that we just spoke about, then we're going to have all these guys that are going to be running around the country trying to make judgments in the streets, like you said, sort of saying, oh, that looks like a Hispanic guy, he looks undocumented to me, and then they detain him, sometimes erroneously so. And we're doing is giving incentives to certain companies, and not just the agents, but also the companies, to sort of begin to build the prisons or detention centers, facilities like the one in Florida that we just saw. And remember, these companies, this law enforcement, immigration law enforcement industrial complex, they get paid by the day, by the bed, for every immigrant that is detained. So the incentive is not necessarily to solve the problem, to fill it, but to fill in the beds, to get more people in there, and to keep them as many nights as it is possible, because they get paid per night and they make quite a bit of money. So there's a lot of opportunity here for these companies to simply say, look, we have a problem with to keep these people. We cannot just simply put them in a plane and send them away. For every night they keep somebody detained, they get paid by the government. That's the wrong structure of incentives.
Do you have
create this huge complex?
Do you have an updated number on how many deportations have occurred in this country? I read 68,000, but I don't know if that's an up-to-date number.
Oh, no, it's a lot. It's a lot more than that. Just in Texas, I think the number of detentions since the Trump administration took office is, I don't want to say, I think it's about 90,000 detentions just in Texas.
How many deported, actually deported?
Yeah, I don't know exactly the percentage or the number, but I know that there's a lot of incentive to retain them for a few more nights because they get paid for that. They're being deported very quickly, to be sure. I think the number of beds that are going to be added is 160,000 to, I believe the number of beds was about 65,000. So there's 160 to 160 more thousand beds. That's the objective. Imagine having 200,000 people, when this is all said and done, detained, and then these companies are being paid by the bed. The number of detentions may actually go down. I mean, detentions up, retentions up, and of course deportations down.
Okay, so my real question is, of all these tens of thousands of people, how many of them are felons, rapists, murderers,
criminals,
the bad people that Donald Trump said he was going to get rid of? What percentage of those numbers are the bad people?
Yeah, this is a very good question. We know that the numbers, the statistics clearly show that immigrants commit crimes at a very low rate, much, much lower than U.S. citizens or native-born Americans. So there are very few. And the president himself made the promise that he would go only after those hardened criminals, and they would not actually go after the workers in construction sites, in food processing plants, in farms, and places like that. I think that promise didn't last very long. Within a day or two, ICE essentially spread out and began to go into these work sites. I think the number of really hardened criminals, my estimation is that it's a very, very small percentage, well below 1%, the real hardened criminals that ought to be deported from this country.
So most of them,
now, I think it's indiscriminate detentions.
I don't mean to be loaded with this question, but most of them have committed maybe a DUI or a misdemeanor, or even just overstayed their visa. So most of them are not hardened felons.
Right.
Okay. They don't.
That's right. That's right. We're not talking about murderers. We're not talking about people like that. I mean, there may be a handful of them, but really it's a very small number. The policy is not making a distinction today. I think it did under the Biden administration. It did under the first Trump administration to some extent. It did under the Obama administration. They were targeting specific individuals that were already in the list of criminals, people who had committed crimes that are looking for them. Today, I think the policy is essentially criminalizing everyone and going after everyone.
You're listening to Hello Houston. We are speaking with Tony Payan at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. You can join the conversation at 713-440-8870.
And my point is, Tony, that the person that's in charge of all of this, the president, is a convicted felon.
Well, it's ironic, isn't it? I mean, obviously, he has been convicted. There's 42 or 46. I don't remember the number.
I think it was 38. 38 felons.
I was going to say at least 36 of them. But yeah, I mean, this is hypocrisy. You know, this is a big issue. The concern, leave that aside. I think the concern here is that the consequences of this indiscriminate blanket enforcement that is going on risks not only our rights as individuals, because obviously U.S. citizens are being targeted as well in the numbers. I think just statistically, if you think about 65 million Hispanics and then 12 million undocumented, the room for error is very, very large. But the fact that these guys, are having to take shortcuts and racially profile people. So there's some real dangers. And also remember, we're also deputizing under the 287G program many of the local law enforcement agencies. So there's a force multiplier here, and it's compromising relations between law enforcement agencies and, of course, the communities that they serve. So there's that issue, but also we're squeezing the labor market. We've seen the cases of farms that have protested because their labor is being taken away. We've seen construction companies under stress because they can't deliver their projects because they don't have the workers. People don't show up to work. We've seen restaurants close because the kitchen staff doesn't show up because they're afraid of the raids. So they're creating some shock waves in the economy as well. So it's all law enforcement. We're not doing anything to create an opportunity for people to come in and work temporarily or permanently. We're not taking care of that. It's all lopsided, is all about enforcement, and I think that's going to have eventually serious consequences for our economy.
Tony, let me pull you out a little bit into a larger view on all of this, because we often forget that there's a world around us and it's not just us. I'm curious about Mexico's response to the passage of this bill and their reaction and what this could mean for us moving forward with them.
Yeah, Mexico is in a very difficult position. Mexico has no choice. And obviously the Mexican government has made quite a few mistakes. They have allowed organized crime to grow. They have allowed the rule of law to be compromised. But Mexico is heavily dependent on the United States. And we saw the president push very, very hard on Mexico, just bear down on the Mexican government to detain and deport immigrants very quickly. There were some months in which Mexico was actually deporting more people to their countries than the United States was doing. So Mexico at this point is the wall. Mexico is paying for the wall. Mexico, I travel to El Paso and Juarez, my hometown out on the border. I grew up on the border, and I can tell you that there's nothing going on there. The shelters that I visited in Juarez, I think I counted 25 shelters with 32 people in them. That's it. That crisis is over. So what we're doing here is really not justified. That solved, we'll look to solving the problems within the United States and not just by deportation only. There have to be solutions that work for that community, for our economy, and for everyone, I think. So Mexico is simply going to be doing exactly what the president is going to ask them to do. President Sheinbaum, I think, is doing it, and she has no choice, really.
Tony, now I have a question regarding, when we're looking at President Trump's second term, and we're talking about this aggressive stance on immigration, I would love for you to elaborate or talk to us a little bit about, we understand that under President Biden's administration, there were hundreds of thousands of people being deported as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about the differences that are happening now?
Yeah, well, I think that there's a fundamental difference that I think it's important. Of course, the numbers of asylum seekers that were kind of knocking at the U.S. doors at the border was extraordinary. I think it simply overwhelmed the material capacity of the United States to process all these asylum claims. If you remember, at some point, former President Biden stopped the asylum claims because he said that if there were more than 30,000 a day, it was just simply going to collapse the system. And so the president tried to navigate that problem in many, many different ways. But the messaging, I think, was the wrong message, essentially, that you could come in, knock on the door, you'd be given an NTA to appear before an immigration judge, and then you could enter the United States. But at least they try to sort of calibrate the issues, try to assess the value, the genuine claim of asylum seekers. Today, however, we're looking at unprecedented cruelty by the Trump administration. I mean, talking about alligators and talking about these, dehumanizing people and talking about them as criminals when they're really just workers, undocumented, but ultimately workers contributing. We did a study in 2020 at the Baker Institute, and we showed that even in Texas, the contributions to the tax base of just undocumented immigrants in Texas was $500 million to the Texas coffers. So they're net contributors, even if they're undocumented. There has to be a solution for that. The cruelty that we're exhibiting towards immigrants and the dehumanization, I think, is simply unacceptable.
We do have a text, if you'll address it. I've heard this a lot, so I'm just interested in your answer. Being here illegally is actually a criminal offense. So how do you address that? It may not be a felony, but if you're here illegally, you're already a criminal.
No, that is incorrect. That is not the law. It is an administrative violation. You're certainly in violation of U.S. immigration laws, but it's not criminal. It's not classified as criminal. Congress may change that in the future, but let's be very clear. The word criminal, the criminalization of immigration, is being used precisely so that we deny the rights, the due process rights of these individuals. Because in this country, when you are a criminal, you are understood to have no rights. So it is a rhetorical instrument. It is a tool to dehumanize. So let's be very, very clear about that. I think we have to check the law and make sure, because I think it's an administrative violation. Somebody overstates visa.
And to one of your points, we're going to run people off, and nobody's going to want to come here when we say, okay, now you can come back. Why would they want to come back? I think we're going to have a huge hole in our economy.
Under these conditions, I think few people coming into the United States. We're seeing the numbers drop even by legal and legitimate travelers from Europe and Canada. Tourism is way down. I know people in Mexico who are essentially canceling travel. In Texas, we'll receive 8 million visitors from Mexico alone. We see them in the Galleria here in Houston, shopping like crazy. Those people are postponing their trips. They're saying, I'm not going to subject myself to harassment by CBP at the airport upon landing. I'm not going to risk being detained and things like that. So people are canceling. I mean, I think we're losing quite a bit as a consequence, I think, of the kind of policy that we are implementing.
Tony Payan is the Claudio X. Gonzalez Fellow in U.S.-Mexico Studies at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. Tony, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure, guys. Till next time.
Coming up, we'll talk about how the end of bond hearings for undocumented people could lead to the overcrowding at detention centers. Stay with us as Hello Houston continues.
With federal support gone, Houston Public Media needs a stronger foundation for the future. The Houston Public Media Resiliency Fund is our response to ensure this service remains strong, stable, and community-powered. Your gift today helps us stay on the air tomorrow and the day after that. Give now to the Resiliency Fund at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
.org/cars to learn more. Thank you.
On the next Fresh Air, comic and actor Marc Maron talks about panic, grief, his problematic cats, his expanding acting career, and why he's ending his popular podcast WTF, which he started in the early days of podcasting. Maron has a new HBO comedy special titled Panicked, and he's the subject of a new documentary. Join us.
You can hear that tonight at 8 p.m.
From AI in the classroom to concerns over funding and safety, teachers are under pressure. And now the Trump administration is pushing to dismantle the Department of Education. What's it like preparing for a new school year when the rules and resources keep changing? We hear from educators across the country next time on 1A.
You can hear 1A. It's on this afternoon at 2 o'clock on News 88.7.
Support comes from Smart Financial Center in Sugar Land, presenting jazz saxophonist Dave Kaz and Friends. Summer Horns 2025 Tour on Friday, August 1st at Smart Financial Center. Tickets at smartfinancialcenter.net.
Support comes from John Moore, helping with plumbing, electrical, and air conditioning repairs, including out-of-warranty units since 1965. Details at 730-2525 or at johnmooreservices.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now back to Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Earlier this month, the Trump administration eliminated bond hearings for undocumented people, as well as fired 20 immigration judges across the country. Experts have expressed their concerns that these events could lead to detained migrants being forced to stay in overcrowded detention centers longer than necessary, while also preventing them from receiving due process. To tell us more about this, we're joined by the Texas Tribune's Colleen DeGuzman. Colleen, welcome to back to Hello Houston, back to the show.
It's good to be back.
It's been so long.
I know.
Yeah,
well, tell us a little bit more about what experts are saying about this. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, so eliminating bond hearings matters a lot because often having a bond hearing for people in detention centers was an opportunity for a judge to kind of intervene and say, does this person really need to be detained for the time between them being caught into these centers and then having their hearing, because that often takes months or sometimes years long. And so detention is often reserved for people who have, a potential flight risk. And now since everyone is going to be detained, that is one reason why experts say these detention centers are at risk of, being over capacity.
So to be clear, bond is bail. Same
yes,
thing.
but often they weren't being asked bail. That wasn't really
It didn't
part
involve
of-
money?
Mm-mm.
So it was just you were coming back on your own recognizance.
Mhm.
So they said, okay, you can go, but you have to come back for your trial in a year from now.
Mhm.
And they're saying we're afraid you're going to flee and not come back, so we're just going to keep you here.
Mm-hmm. That's
And
what's
so
happening now.
What is the reason? What is this administration saying that the reason they're giving by eliminating the bond hearings for migrants?
So the context of this is, when I look at these two recent changes, one is eliminating bond hearings, and then on top of that, firing over dozens of immigration judges. I spoke to experts who said, it's very clear that the Trump administration's strategy here is to kind of pressure people into self-deportation, making it so uncomfortable at these centers that people are more willing to just make the decision on their own. If you're stuck at these centers for a long time where it's really uncomfortable, there's not, space, and it's going to become even more difficult to get to your hearing, that it's going to cause more deportations.
Could it also backfire potentially on people who are undocumented and they would normally show up for their bond hearing, but now they're afraid? What are experts saying about that?
Could you rephrase that question?
Sure. Is it possible that this type of, somebody who would normally show up for a bond hearing is going to say, I'm actually afraid now and I'm not going to go because I don't want to be deported. I don't want to be, accused of
or detained.
I think there was always that fear of being detained. I think that So you're asking like people who trusted the bond hearing process and that they would be able to be out on bond. Yeah, I think that's happening. I'm not so certain yet, but that does sound like that would be the thought process.
So the conundrum that we're facing here is that by getting rid of the judges, this process can't happen more quickly. We're backing up then the system. The detention centers are getting more full. The release valve, which would be a hearing in front of a judge, has been taken away. So then you're implying that as these detention centers just get more and more full, the only thing to do with these folks is deport them. But who's making the decision then that they go from being in the detention centers to being deported if a judge has been removed from the process?
Self-deportation. There's this paper that people can get and say, you know what, like send me back.
It's too crowded in here, I want out. And so they're making
That's
the
what experts have told me. It's like this forced bottleneck to kind of pressure these centers and the people in them to self-deport because, that process takes a while, it costs money and all these things. So that having these two, someone called it a 1-2 punch, which it seems very accurate, of having more people go to these being held at these detention centers and then having the process slow since there are fewer immigration judges processing these cases. And someone even told me that the number of immigration judges that they had was already too small because nationally we had 700 immigration judges. Trump recently fired 106 and they were in their 2-year probationary period. And so, we have a 4 million number backlog of immigration cases, 4 million compared to 700 judges. This really does seem like it's like a forced bottleneck.
Well,
right
and
now.
didn't we just hear that for every night that someone is in detention, there's more money coming to that detention center?
Yeah.
So there's
Tony
an
Payan just said
incentive
that.
to keep people in detention.
And I was going to say, are they offering, when you talk about that incentive also, or making it so uncomfortable that people want to just self-deport, are they offering an option if you are in a detention center and you do want to self-deport, are they providing any kind of resources or services for people?
That is a question for another story.
Yeah,
Yes,
because I think the answer is
I
not
think
much.
Yes.
They don't have a Luby's next door, that's for sure.
That's right. Well, Colleen DeGuzman is a reporter for the Texas Tribune. Colleen, thank you so much for joining us today. Yeah, I think these are all very complex issues. And we had Tony Payan earlier on discussing essentially that this feels very politically charged versus good policy for immigration, because there is no denying that there has to be law and order, but there is a way to do it and still provide dignity and humanitarian respect for people.
At the end of the day, if these people are not hardcore criminals, if they're not the felons that Trump promised he was going to deport, what is the big deal? Why do we want to get rid of people who are here to make a better life for themselves, to become educated, contribute to the society? be doing a lot of jobs nobody else wants to do, and we're going to send all these people back, and nobody's going to want to come to this country.
I think that the thought process behind that, right, Frank, is that people feel like they're, one, taking advantage of the system, two, taking jobs that should be going to U.S. citizens, three, taking up hospital beds whenever people need. It's that sentiment
and then
that
you get
they
to
were
Medicaid.
influxing, our system.
You get to Medicaid where they say, if you're going to get Medicaid, you're going to have to work. And everyone says, well, I don't want to work.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Taking away what jobs from what people is my question.
I'm there with you. Coming up on Hello Houston, we'll continue diving into the top stories of the day. Stay with us for the second hour of Hello Houston.
Stay tuned. There's more Hello Houston on the way with Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Support comes from Stages, presenting Honky Tonk Laundry, a musical comedy about two women transforming a laundromat into the town's hottest honky tonk, set to songs by Dolly Parton, Carrie Underwood, and more. July 25th through August 17th. StagesHouston.com.
This afternoon, looking for a high around 97, and then tonight mostly clear, a low near 78. It's 86, and this is your NPR station, KUHF. Houston News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. It's 12 o'clock.
Just ahead on this hour of Hello Houston, we'll continue discussing today's top stories, including the Trump administration rolling back benefits for those under the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program. I'm Celeste Diaz-Sherman.
And I'm Frank Billingsley. 45th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Lex Frieden, one of the key architects of the ADA, will join us to talk about how far we've come and what still needs to be done.
And I'm Ernie Manous. Plus, we'll also discuss Juvenile Arthritis Awareness Month with the Executive Director of the Arthritis Foundation, Houston, Texas, Gulf Coast.
And we want to hear from you. Give us a call or text us, 713-440-8870, or email us, talk@hellohouston.org. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel. Just go to hellohouston.org and click that big orange banner.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The European Union is trying to sell the new trade deal it struck with the U.S. to the bloc's member states. Faced with the threat of a 30% tariff on most EU goods come Friday, last Sunday, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen accepted President Trump's offer to pay half that in exchange for sparing tariffs on U.S. goods that enter Europe. But the details of which industries will be covered under this trade pact have yet to be ironed out. The U.S. economics editor for The Economist, Archie Hall, spoke with NPR about the EU's bid to avoid a protracted trade war.
There's those 15% tariffs on the American side, and that's not paralleled on the European side. And so the decision that seems to be made by the European leadership is that effectively it was more important to avoid a kind of tit-for-tat retaliatory trade war situation, which would have potentially harmed both sides and particularly harmed Europe as probably the more vulnerable side in these negotiations.
Archie Hall on NPR's Here and Now. Some of the Venezuelan men deported from the U.S. to El Salvador are describing their stay in a maximum security prison. NPR Sergio Martinez Beltran reports the men say they were beaten, sexually abused, and denied adequate food.
One of the men is 19-year-old Carlos Daniel Terán. He was sent to Secot in March as part of President Trump's mass deportation efforts.
Eso es un infierno de que por allá.
That was hell, says Terán. He says guards at Secot stomped on the men with their heavy boots and hit them with batons. He says one time they shot at them with rubber pellets. El Salvador's government did not respond to a request for comment. A spokesperson for the Department of Homeland Security called the allegations, quote, false sub-stories. The Trump administration paid El Salvador $6 million to house the men. The White House said they were gang members, but many of them, including Terán, do not have a criminal record in the U.S. Sergio Martinez Beltran, NPR News.
The drug maker Novo Nordisk is slashing its sales forecast for its obesity drug Wegovy. The company shares are down more than 21% in midday trading. Here's NPR's Cindy Lupkin.
Novo Nordisk says sales of its obesity medicine Wegovy are expected to grow no more than 14% this year. That's down from its spring prediction of up to 21%. The company blames cheaper alternatives made by compounding pharmacies. Compounding pharmacies are allowed to make what are essentially copies of drugs when they're in short supply. The Food and Drug Administration ruled the shortage of Wegovy over earlier this year, but some compounders are testing the legal landscape. They're customizing obesity drugs for patients by adding vitamins or tweaking doses. Novo Nordisk says it's pursuing multiple strategies to end the practice, including litigation. Sydney Lupkin, NPR News.
The Dow's down more than 200 points. S&P's fallen 13. This is NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Alexandra Hart. Acting Harris County Attorney Christian Menefee and former Houston City Council member Amanda Edwards are locked in a dead heat in the special election for Texas's 18th Congressional District. News 88.7 political reporter Andrew Schneider says the latest University of Houston Hobby School survey says Edwards and Menefee lead a field of nearly 24 candidates seeking to fill the open seat.
The poll shows Edwards and Menefee, both Democrats, tied when it comes to their net favorability ratings. Tied for second place are State Representative Jolanda Jones, a Democrat, and Carmen Maria Montiel, a Republican.
We have a four-way race for one of two positions in an almost certain runoff.
Mark Jones is a senior research fellow at the Hobby School.
At this point, we have to view Edwards, Menefee, Jones, and Montiel all as viable candidates to enter the runoff, with Edwards and Menefee having a slight advantage.
Under federal law, Jones says the earliest such a runoff would likely take place is January of next year. I'm Andrew Schneider, News 88.7.
A suspect in recent fires at Memorial Park is under arrest. Since last October, the Houston Fire Department investigated 15 grass fires throughout the area. Houston Fire Chief Thomas Munoz says no structures were damaged as a result, only vegetation. He says 45-year-old Dustin Schlane is the suspect.
He did confess to setting some multiple fires in the area. He is currently in the Harris County Jail charged with two counts of arson felony, and he is being held on a $50,000 bond.
Munoz says there has been no reports of additional fires at the park since the arrest. We could hit 100 degrees on the thermometer today. The National Weather Service says triple digits are expected both this afternoon and tomorrow. Rain is possible on Thursday, which could increase the chance for a heat advisory being put in place over the weekend due to the humidity after the rain. Having said that, there is currently no tropical development in the Atlantic Ocean. However, there are possible signs of activity that could occur in mid-August. I'm Alexandra Hart, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance with Snapshot, a personalized program that bases rates on safe driving habits, at Progressive.com. Not available in California or from all agents. This is NPR.
From Houston Public Media and News 88.7, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manous, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Welcome back to the second hour of Hello Houston.
You know, if you were listening in the first hour, you knew we got a bit obsessed talking about Shipley's Do-Nuts.
They've
Celeste,
been bought.
What's an update? Frank, an update
We
for
have
us.
an update. Our Houston Public Media, our new news director, was listening to us and
Scott
Flanagan. Thank you.
Brought us in a box of Shipley's Donuts. So if you're watching us on YouTube, you can go to youtube.com, go to the Houston Public Media channel, and you can watch Celeste, Frank, and I eat a donut.
And thank you, Scott Flanagan, our HPM news director.
I'm sure a lot of people would be interested in watching that. We had a very busy first hour, a lot of talk about immigration policy, ICE, what's going on there. It was quite quite engaging. Also, we heard from that young man who is 10 years old who went out to raise money for Houston Public Media.
And how much did he raise?
Well, we know specifically because we all said we would match whatever he raised, and he's raised $150. So we invited him to come and join us in the studio, and he will come soon to visit us. And we also encouraged all of you, if you wanted to donate $150 in his name, you could do so. And we gave the website, houstonpublicmedia.org/donate. But you can also call 888-909-0887 and give a donation in Eric's name of $150 because this young 10-year-old boy wanted to preserve PBS Kids.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just a great story. And he did it on his own, went out into his own community, raised the money going door to door. And we're going to match it. And we hope you'll get inspired to do it to 888-909-0887.
Okay. These are great
Yeah,
donuts.
and these are great. They're warm.
Are they fresh? Are they the fresh
And
air?
they're great.
very
It's
fresh.
lunchtime, and we're on air during lunch. This is a nice little treat.
This is lunch.
But,
Wow,
again, we
donuts
want to...
made their way down here, so they're going to stay with me.
Well, again, we on Hello Houston always welcome you to the conversation at 713-440-8870. And right into the headlines, China has launched a baby subsidy. The Chinese government will pay families $500 a year per baby until the child turns 3, the state media reported yesterday. The cash is meant to be a birthing incentive to remedy the country's ongoing population decline, which also has an effect on its economy. China's fertility rate dropped from 2.51 children per woman in 1990 to 1.01 last year, well below the 2.1 rate needed to maintain a stable population. Local governments in China already offer their own baby bucks incentives, with the capital of the Inner Mongolia region offering the most generous subsidy of up to $14,000 per child. It's not just China. 2/3 of the world's population currently live in countries with below replacement birth rates, including Americans. The U.S. recorded an all-time low of 1.6 births per woman last year. The Trump administration has reportedly considered a $5,000 baby bonus, and the recently passed Republican tax bill included the government funding a $1,000 investment account for babies born through 2028. Does a baby bonus spark your interest? Would you consider having a baby to take advantage of this type of incentive? Give us a call at 713-440-8870.
This is one of those things where I'm going to speak without knowing what I'm talking about. Because, yeah, somewhere I had heard about, because my initial thought always is, aren't we overpopulated already? Aren't there just too many people? Isn't this a good thing that we're culling the herd a bit and trying to get things in balance? And we talk about the costs for everything and the number of people and the population size in big cities and how much taxes are because you got to pay for all this infrastructure because there's so many people. So maybe shrinking size is a good idea. But somewhere I read an entire essay, and I remember none of the details about how detrimental it is when your population starts to decrease. But I can't remember any of the facts of it.
Well, it is a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
The young people have to help pay for the old people. And if your population is old heavy and not young heavy, then that's the imbalance because your 20 to 40-year-olds especially, and even I would say 25 to 35s are the most important if you're going to populate any country.
Yeah.
Look at even after World War II, a lot of countries were decimated with young men having died, and they were giving financial incentives. I know Italy had lost so many people. They were giving financial incentives to have babies. And I imagine Ukraine and Russia, maybe not Russia, but Ukraine's going to have the same issue. Thousands and tens of thousands of young men are being killed. So where are these babies going to come from?
Right.
If you want them to have loving homes, right?
Right. And again, we want to hear from you. Does a baby bonus spark your interest? Would you consider having a baby to take advantage of this incentive?
No,
give us a call,
come on.
713-440-8870. Yep, I'm going to answer my own question. No.
No?
Nope. Absolutely
What
not.
if
And
it was
I
like-
actually think that it's just from a parent, you should not be having babies because $500 or $5,000
I know,
or
but hold on. Let me
whatever
move you
it
to
is.
Mongolia. And how about $14,000?
Do you know how much it costs to raise a child today?
That's not going to do it for you?
A lot more than $14,000.
Well,
so, no, this is not, again, give us a call, 713-440-8870.
And let's make the point, even in this country, it's hard to afford housing.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to afford education.
Yep.
People are not graduating.
Childcare.
Well, people aren't graduating from college until they're 26, 27 in some cases.
Yeah.
So the idea of starting a family, and not to make too much of it, but women are on a time clock.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so even in this country, we're going to have a shortage of birth rate.
I believe we have
I
seen
think we
that.
already
and
are.
I know there is a big, millennials and younger millennials and Gen Zers are questioning because it is so expensive.
Right.
Yesterday we talked to Nicole Nosek, who was talking about we have one of the highest percentages of older, 20-somethings living with their parents still, not because they necessarily want to, but it's so expensive.
Mm-hmm. And there's no peer pressure to start a family and have children. You think about the 50s and the 60s.
Keeping up with the Joneses. You had the white picket fence
Why
and the
aren't you
house
having
and
children?
the dog
What's
and
wrong
the
with you?
2.1.
Well, I must
people are getting
quote
away from
Quentin
that.
Crisp on that. It's tired of keeping up with the Joneses. Drag them down to your level. It's
Right.
much easier. So think about that. Though what I also wonder, though, when we're talking about problems with our budget and the deficit, is making a $5,000 or a $1,000 investment in baby accounts really the right direction to be going right now? Is it just more money that's spent? Aren't people going to have babies anyway for the most part?
What I do think is very interesting, and when we had, I forget her name, but we did have an expert talking about the Trump account. She actually, where there's a difference, right? These, in the Big Beautiful Bill, they talk that one of the items on there is a Trump account for babies born, like we were talking about, in 2028, and they get $1,000, and that is different because it is an investment parents can then make. Specifically, they have to make in their child's name. Now that is a different.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's necessarily just like here's $500, here's $14,000, have a baby.
Agreed.
Right.
Then I read another article where a man who's happily married said, "My wife and I do not want children. That is not in our plan. We do everything we can not to have children, but to still have a sex life.
Mm-hmm.
And we're scared to death we're going to accidentally get pregnant, and abortion is illegal. So what are we supposed to do?" I mean, if you think about it, you can't tell a married couple, well, if you don't want children, just don't have sex.
Yeah.
You say, well, you take all the precautions you can. And then the government comes along and says, you can't take any of those precautions. You can't have a Plan B pill. You can't have an abortion. What are you supposed to do? It's a terrible infringement, and it's very rare, but it happens.
Again, 713-440-8870. We do have a call from Rohan from Sugar Land on babies. Rohan, welcome to Hello Houston. What's your question or comment?
Hi. No, I was just, it was kind of appalling to think about something like this even happening, given that the healthcare costs alone of even giving birth to a child in this country are so astronomical that a $1,000 or $5,000 or, in what Ernie was saying, a $14,000 credit, even if you're in Mongolia, is not really going to do you much good,
Yeah.
No, you're right. It's sort of a joke, isn't it?
I remember, I think I had a friend who said she gave birth to a baby and, her ambulance bill was $10,000 just because she didn't make it to the hospital on her own. And it was insane.
Yeah. Explains why Courtney Zavala drove herself. Her water broke at Channel 2. She drove herself to the hospital.
Well, Rohan, thank you so much for giving us a call on Hello Houston.
I want to jump in and help you out with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and specifically the Trump account, the savings account for babies. The details of that are every U.S. child born between 2025 and 2028 gets $1,000 automatically into a tax-deferred investment account. Parents could add up to $5,000 a year, with employers adding up to $2,500 a year, with earnings growing until the child turns 18. The funding support is a key milestone for education, home ownership, and starting a small business. Once they reach maturity, they can take the money out. So it's still an early rollout, and the complete rules and instructions are expected in mid-2026. So you can put that money in, and when they turn 18, they have this nest egg that the government helped, you helped, your business helped, your employer helped.
Well, to your point, this is a very good text from Andrew, kind of along the same lines. There needs to be more than just a monetary incentive. People need to know that their children will have a good education. The whole family needs to know they will have affordable access to medical care. There also has to be a guarantee that any children will be able to live a good life in the future world. Why bring children into a world if you can't guarantee those things?
Let me tell you.
That's why I made such a big deal about Montreal. Canada has so much of this figured out. It's not easy, but it can be done.
You know, this morning when my son was throwing a fit, I was like, "You're very lucky you're cute, Philip." Because
he is cute.
Which is funny. It's the same thing we say to you someday.
Both your kids are cute.
When I'm throwing my fits.
I already heard that before.
Yeah,
I think we have a call.
We have a call.
Please save us.
I throw fits too. There you go.
Alvin, we know Alvin. You know Alvin.
Hello, Alvin.
Alvin's a big fan. Hi, Alvin.
Hi,
What's
Alvin.
up?
How you guys doing? Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Loud and clear.
All right, fantastic, man. You guys, look, it's always a pleasure to talk to you guys. It's a nice sunny day. And also, I want to remind everybody to please donate to this station every
Amen.
day. You guys are like a, I mean, you're like a drug. I can't go without a day.
We're cracked.
Well, we are cracked. I'll give you that. Yeah. Alvin, what's on your mind, though, about the babies? Share with us baby stories.
Well, this is the thing. I think that what you guys have been saying is correct. First off, don't give me one-off monetary stipend. Actually, continue to fund the programs that have been created over our lifetime to support a better quality of life. Mm-hmm. That's what's encouraging to people having babies. For example, even their student loans. One of the reasons that people have forestalled having families is because they're still bottlenecked with student loans. Why don't you help with those types of things? And then lastly, connecting to your previous segment, this is actually all connected. Why would you be deporting people when immigrants are actually one of the reasons we have a younger population?
Mm-hmm.
That's a very good point.
Alvin, thank you for that. And it's funny, it makes me think of when you see those signs like move in today, 1 month free rent. And people are like, oh, I'll move in there. I get free rent. You forget the 11 months that are going to follow that you have to pay. So they may give you $1,000 now for the baby. But let me tell you, those next 11 months are going to be a lot more in the life of that child.
The makeup alone for men or women.
That's right. All right, moving along. Frank, what's next?
No, it's to me next.
Oh.
I'm talking trash.
He's angry, but I'm angry. I'm angry about this too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, okay. So out-of-service trucks, contaminated trash mixed with recyclable materials, staffing shortages, or single depot with long wait times. These are just among the contributing factors to the often days-long delay in what? Recycling pickup across Houston. The problem with the solid waste department generates the most 311 complaint calls to the city. About 53,000 opened 311 cases they had on Monday. That's about 24,000 concerned with solid waste issues alone. That's an awful lot of complaints on solid waste. Calls about missing recycle bin pickups are soaring upward. On Wednesday, City Council will vote to allocate $12.5 million for new trucks. A spokesperson said for the department that will purchase about 25 additional vehicles. I'm a little concerned about the math there and how much it costs for a vehicle. Yeah. But anyway, heavy trash pickup is currently delayed by 2 weeks. Yard waste is also delayed. The department is picking up its heavy trash with yard waste, the spokesperson said. The department will run an open demand pilot program for those services where you will actually call to have it come and get it rather than running on a routine that's actually currently on a delayed basis. What does everyone think about what's going on with trash pickup in the city? 713-440-8870.
Mine's still sitting there. We thought last Monday, a week ago, was our recycle day because we recycle.
Yeah.
The regular garbage has been coming when it should on Mondays, and every other Monday's recycle day. Well, it didn't come Monday, so we thought, well, we're just going to leave it out. It'll come next Monday. It didn't come yesterday either. And this is what's happening. Everybody in the neighborhood is leaving their green barrel out because they don't know when it's going to get picked up.
Yep.
What does this do? It inhibits parking because it's right there on the curb in the middle of the street. You can't park on the street like you normally would. And if it rains, it blocks the gutters because it's usually against the curb. And so you get blocked gutters for the rain to drain. And it's sitting there. Fortunately, it's recycled, so it doesn't smell. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't accidentally get knocked over by errant people in trucks. It's in the way. It should be done. I pay my taxes. Come pick up my garbage.
Yeah, well, it's funny because we've had the same problem, and I live on one of those historic streets that has the exposed bricks, the Frieden Towns brick. So it's a very narrow street to begin with. We've got all those cans lined out there, and the other day I saw my neighbor, who's usually pretty good on all of knowing what's in the know, and she had her little green. She was taking her green can out, and she said she went on the app because she couldn't figure out when they pick it up. Said that was the day to put it out there, so she put it out there. And it still stayed for 3 days.
So what the app John Whitmire knows about this. Has been a big ongoing issue. A lot of trucks, a lot of trucks, are out of service and just need to be that. And then there was we had to get rid of all these personnel because of the budget. So we may not have people to actually be picking up theirs. But most of these trucks just need to be driven. Doesn't require a crew of 3. It requires somebody to drive
that's
it,
the other
and they
problem.
pick it up with the claw, they dump it, they go back.
Okay, I'm going to challenge you on that one because that was a problem we had 2 weeks ago. They didn't even pick up our garbage because they only had one person in the truck, the driver, and our neighbors had put their cans all too close together. There needs to be a gap between each can, and people don't realize that. So when the claw can't get it if they're all squeezed together.
Okay, but that doesn't mean they should have somebody there to do that for
well,
y'all.
They always did. And that was the thing that people, and I'm not just saying for us, people put their cans and they line them up next to each other. And that's what the person on the back of the truck would adjust so that these could be picked up. If they weren't picked up, which they weren't, it went another whole week before our trash got picked up. And so it just sat there. Now, I went into this story. Somebody, I'm not going to tell the story again, had to do with someone throwing up in my garbage can. That's another whole story. But it went 2 weeks before my trash was finally picked up and I could clean out the garbage can. So
I don't know what the solution is other than to get the city on the ball and get this taken care of.
Well, I do know that today is National Chicken Wing Day, National Lasagna Day, and National Lipstick Day. So put on some lipstick, have a little lasagna on your way to go out for wings.
That's
and then
right.
You're celebrating everything.
Coming up on Hello Houston, it is the 35th anniversary of Americans with Disability Act, and we'll talk about how far we've come and what still needs to be done. This is News 88.7.
Federal funding for public media has been cut. In response, we're creating Houston Public Media's Resiliency Fund. Donations made toward the fund will directly counter the loss of the $2.2 million in federal funds that were cut annually and strengthen our station's foundation to provide our services into the future. Contributing to this fund is easy and quick and makes all the difference to our station. Help build the Resiliency Fund now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
Is your essential daily guide to the people, places, issues, and ideas that define Greater Houston.
Vulnerable households that have less of a means to recover from a flood, have less money to do it, are concentrated in the highest flood risk neighborhoods.
There's never going to be a perfect moment to come out or reveal something about yourself. There's never going to be a perfect moment to call somebody you haven't spoken to in years. Don't wait for all the stars to align.
I'm Craig Cohen. Join us for the next Houston Matters, weekday mornings at 9 here on News 88.7.
I'm Jesse Thorne.
I think I've looked at it before, but I don't know if I've looked at it recently.
This week on Bullseye, actor Megan Stalter of Hacks looks at her Wikipedia page for the very first time.
What does it say?
Plus, Tramel Tillman, Mr. Milchick on the great show Severance. That's on the next Bullseye from MaximumFun.org and NPR.
It's coming up Thursday night at 9.
Federal funding for public media has been cut. And in today's economy, that creates real challenges for local public media.
Our response to this decision? Launching Houston Public Media's Resiliency Fund to bridge the gap from the $2.2 million lost annually in federal funding.
No matter what the future holds, you can protect local independent media when you give.
Give now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
Or call 888-909-0887.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's Ernie Manous, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Last week marked 35 years since the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law. Landmark legislation that reshaped life for millions of Americans. The ADA prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in jobs, schools, transportation, and public spaces. It brought lasting changes from curb cuts and ramps to equal access in education and government services. But while the law opened doors, many barriers still remain. Joining us to reflect on the ADA's legacy and where progress is still needed is Lex Frieden, one of the key architects of the ADA and director of the Independent Living Research Utilization Program and Tier Memorial Hermann. Lex, welcome to Hello Houston.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here today.
Lex, it's great to have you with us. We also want to invite our listeners to give us a call at 713-440-8870 to tell us how the ADA has impacted their lives. Have you found moments where your life has been more rich, more fulfilling, or even just brings it up to a level where it should have been all along thanks to the ADA? Give us a call. Share your stories with us at 713-440-8870. You can also text us that number or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. We'd love to hear from you.
You know, it's an interesting time, Lex, as we acknowledge this milestone of 35 years of working towards progress. We're in a time where Congress is considering proposals from President Donald Trump to slash funding for the disability rights centers in each state. And this could mean a loss of more than 60% of federal dollars. Can these programs survive moving forward?
Well, whether they can survive or not remains to be seen. That's the same issue, I guess, that public TV is facing. There's a need for services, and perhaps they will receive contributions from people, but there are other resources as well. And the federal government continues to sponsor the Americans with Disabilities Act ADA centers. We have one, in fact, in Houston at our program at Tier Memorial Hermann, and it is the number for it, I'll just give that, is 1-800-949-4232. Anybody who needs any help with the ADA interpretation or other disability laws can call that number anytime, and our folks will get back to you. In fact, we cover 5 states in the region: Texas, New Mexico, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. And we process about 2,000 queries and issues every month.
Hey, Lex, I know a lot of people, when they think of ADA, they basically think of wheelchair access. They think of the ramps, the curbs, being able to get up a ramp instead of stairs, bathrooms that are enlarged, elevators that have the right access to them, maybe even in Braille. Well, what are some of the biggest issues that are out there that people may not think about?
Well, you raised 2 good points, Frank. First of all, the ADA covers many types of disabilities, and in fact, the law, strictly speaking, would even cover anyone who was perceived to have a disability. So ADA covers physical impairments, people with visual impairments and hearing impairments. It covers people with psychiatric conditions, people with learning disabilities, and so on. And sometimes, as you pointed out, we often focus on the issues pertaining to physical impairments, but I'll give you an example of one accommodation that is prompted by the ADA, which people don't even think about, and that is captioning on the television and captioning.
Or on
you
your
know,
YouTube feed.
Well, I mean, you think about people in a bar watching a game on television, and they're able to see what's going on because they couldn't hear it otherwise.
Right.
That's all a function of the ADA.
You know, I tell people all the time, closed captioning is your friend, and and I have hearing aids, but so many people that I know that don't have hearing aids, they count on it now. They just, there's so much going on in their lives, they need closed captioning just to keep up with the show.
Well, you can also have open captioning, which means anybody can see it, and most televisions you can bring that up simply by a function on the settings. So anybody would have access to captioning through the ADA provisions there. But you asked, what have we accomplished, and we've actually completed a recent survey, a national survey. We had hundreds of people respond from almost every state. And we've learned from that education improvements have probably been those that are best recognized by people with disabilities and family members. So people who 35 years ago were even turned down to go to universities and colleges because they had a disability, or kids who were not able to be served well in the public schools or even the private schools, we were left out of the mainstream. And today, people with disabilities, kids with disabilities, can get an education, equal education to everybody else, which that's quite an accomplishment. I mean, you think about the public transportation, lifts on all the buses.
Yep.
The day before the ADA was signed, there was no federal rule requiring that. Houston, by the way, was one of the early cities to adopt full access under former Mayor Bob Lanier. The transit system was made accessible before the ADA required that. But there were only a few cities, New York among them, that had that provision. So transportation around the country has improved dramatically. It's obvious, it's evident. You mentioned ramps and Braille, and that's all had a huge impact. Think about it, 45 years ago, I tried to get into the post office downtown, and there were only steps. I couldn't get in the post office, a federal building. I couldn't get into most private. To get into the Social Security office, I had to use a freight elevator in a building in order to get up to the 15th floor. So these are the kinds of changes that we've made over 35 years ago. And one of the most significant changes are the attitudes of the public and awareness of the public. Years ago, people looked at folks with disabilities askew because they really didn't understand what we were all about and didn't realize that we wanted to be part of the mainstream as well. So those attitudes about disability have changed remarkably.
Lex, let me take you back 35 years, because I think there's a great lesson in here for anybody who wants to make an impact and make a difference in the world. When you folks gathered, or however it came to be that you created the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, I'm curious, it must have seemed monumental beyond attack, but you knew something had to be done to make sure that the world changed moving forward to take us up to where we are even today. What was the mindset in the beginning of all of this?
Well, I'll share my own experience. In 1968, after I left Tier Memorial Hermann, I had a broken neck and started using a wheelchair as a result of that. I tried to go back to college. I'd been at the university when I broke my neck. I was a freshman. And I tried to go back to college after my neck was broken and I used a wheelchair. And my admission was turned down, they said, because I had a disability and their campus would not accommodate students with disabilities. The irony of that is that the university that turned me down had one of the few accessible campuses in the United States at that time. So, those kind of experiences motivated me and other people in the late 1960s and early 1970s. And in Houston, in about 1977, we formed an organization called the Coalition for Barrier-Free Living, which, by the way, still exists and sponsors the Houston Center for Independent Living. But those of us early on began to go to city council meetings, began to protest the transit system that was not accessible. And we had some interesting times. Former Mayor Hoffines one day said he wanted everybody in the city to know how good our transit system was. So he wanted everybody to ride free on a Saturday, and he, the mayor, would be there too. And we found out where the mayor and his press folks were going to be to promote this. So we had about 40 people in wheelchairs who showed up to ride the bus with the mayor, the free day on the bus. And the press switched their story from about the mayor riding the bus to all these people who could not ride the bus. And these kinds of actions were occurring all over the United States in the 1970s. In the 1980s, we began officially to work on a law that would prevent discrimination on the basis of disabilities, and that became the ADA.
What do you say to people who have pushback or did have pushback there saying, but it costs money and it's a small portion of the population. Why should all of us have to adhere to this for that group? What was your pushback then, and how has it changed in the way they react to it today?
Well, you raised a lot of issues. First of all, the cost issue. One of the biggest groups to protest the ADA at that time was McDonald's. And they said, we can't afford to put ramps on all our restaurants, and we can't afford to put widened doors on the bathrooms so people in wheelchairs could use the toilet. And this law would break us. Well, we asked McDonald's and the Congress did to come forward and describe the situation they would face. And it was laughable because they would cost several hundred, maybe a few $1,000s in order to accommodate people in their restaurants, each one of them. But their profit margin was so big, it was a relatively small amount of the cost of doing that business. So after embarrassing a few companies like that, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce came around and supported the ADA, and the cost issues sort of went away at that point in time. We also did some economic studies, and at that point in time, people with disabilities were virtually nowhere in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And the theory was, if you make things accessible, people with disabilities could go and get jobs and pay taxes and help to cover these expenses. And sure enough, that's what happened.
Lex, I have a question, and it's about the medicinal use of marijuana, which is not a federal law. I would think that the ADA would get behind this. That not only marijuana, but also hemp products, just because of the positive effects they can have on paraplegics and people that do have disabilities. Why is the ADA not spearheading a drive on that?
Well, ADA is not an aggressive legislation. It is a defensive legislation. And so I don't think, proponents of the ADA, advocates may well also support some of the issues you just mentioned. But the ADA itself is a law that prevents discrimination. And that, for the matter of fact, that's no more or less discriminatory whether they have rules that will promote certain usage of marijuana or other kinds of medications. That's outside the purview of the ADA.
Well, kind of. I mean, it's legal in 40 states, but not in 12. So I would think that the ADA would say, look, we got to make it legal in those other 12 because people with disabilities in the other 40 states are getting help, but the ADA people in these states are not.
That's an interesting question. Honestly, I haven't thought of it before, and it's worth consideration, I suppose. But Frank, the issue is not whether 40 states can support something and 12 don't. The issue is whether people with disabilities are being discriminated against, inequitably.
Yeah, I get it.
And if everybody else can't do something or can do something, then people with disabilities ought to be able to. It would be discriminatory if the state of Texas allowed non-disabled people to use marijuana, but not people with disabilities for medicinal purposes. And that's where the ADA might come in. But in terms of simply supporting a use of one medication or another, I don't think that's within the purview of the ADA, because that, in this case, would, not separate, not create a difference, a measurable difference between people with disabilities and those without.
Lex, based on the 2025 ADA survey, 69.3% of respondents reported that the ADA had a very high impact on access to public education and post-secondary education. They're highlighting some incredible progress, but yet the survey also highlighted where some progress has stalled. Can you elaborate on what needs to still happen moving forward and what you all want to happen moving forward?
Yeah, there are a few issues, Celestia, that are really significant. Number one, I mentioned employment before, and employment has improved with the ADA, but employment discrimination on the basis of disability, according to the data that we have, still exists. So employers are clever now. Rather than saying they don't want to hire you because you obviously have a disability, they will say, well, we had several people who ranked highly in our interviews and our reviews, and we selected the one that was most qualified. And they never actually say the reason they didn't select the person with a disability was because they had a disability. Nonetheless, the discrimination occurs and the disparity is clear. 2/3 of people with disabilities who want to work and who are in the workforce are not employed now. And that compares to maybe 20% of the non-disabled population. So that disparity is significant, despite the fact that we've made some progress. Another issue that's really, really significant now is housing. People with disabilities cannot find housing that's accessible to them or that provides supports they need. And that housing issue is becoming more and more significant as our population ages.
Lex, I'm going to jump in here for one quick second. We've got a call on the line that would love to talk to you. It's Lori from Friendswood. Lori, what's on your mind? And what's your question or comment for Lex?
Hi, my name is Lori, and I have multiple sclerosis. About 3 to 5 years ago, I attempted to use a YMCA. It was a brand new YMCA. It had no access to the facility using a button to get in. I had to wait for someone to open the door for me. There were no internal. The doors were very, very heavy internally. a woman with a child in a wheelchair said she could barely open the doors. So I contacted both state and federal officials. The state said there was no requirement relative to the doors, and the federal government officials basically said they had bigger fish to fry. So I was very disappointed. I never used the facility.
Thank you for that call, Lori. Lex, your reaction to what Lori was telling us?
Yeah, I think that's too bad. I mean, I think it's wrong. I'm disappointed in the YMCA for not accommodating people better than that. The issue of the power doors is one that relates to cost, and the ADA does not require organizations to make extraordinary costs. So I don't know what the cost would be in terms of the power doors. I can tell you that the City Hall in Houston only got power doors a few years ago. And they, that was, I suppose, a function of the additional cost, and it wasn't in the budget. However, the YMCA, I should think, could be able to raise the money to do the doors if they wanted to. The issue of the inside doors is a little different because the inside door can be adjusted to make it a lighter push. And that would be an easy fix for the YMCA if they knew how to find somebody who could make adjustment in the doors. And that happens frequently, by the way. The doors, the self-closing doors, are adjusted so hard to pull that we can't get in and out of them. And it's a fairly easy adjustment. So, Lori, I would encourage you to go back to the YMCA and talk to the officials there. And if you would, go to a board meeting. And that's what we used to do, and that can be very effective if you just present yourself in a public forum and say, these are the issues I'm facing. Very often the leadership will respond in a positive manner.
Lex, if there's other folks like Lori out there, what's the best number? Where can they reach out to get help and guidance in these issues?
1-800-949-4232. Lori, give a call to 1-800-949-4232, and you can get some really good advice there.
And we'll be sure to try to put that number up somewhere as well for our Hello Houston listeners. Lex Frieden is the director of the Independent Living Research Utilization Program at Tier Memorial Hermann and a key architect of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Lex, thanks so much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Coming up, we'll talk about Juvenile Arthritis Month. Stay with us as Hello Houston continues.
With federal support gone, Houston Public Media needs a stronger foundation for the future. The Houston Public Media Resiliency Fund is our response to ensure this service remains strong, stable, and community-powered. Your gift today helps us stay on the air tomorrow and the day after that. Give now to the Resiliency Fund at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
Support comes from Stewart PC, a Houston law firm assisting executives and employers with executive employment agreements, litigating executive compensation and non-compete agreements, and management training. More at attorneysforexecutives.com.
Support comes from Houston Grand Opera, presenting their 25-26 season, including the first ever presentations of Puccini's Il Tridico, Silent Night, and Robert Wilson's fantasy production of Messiah. Season subscriptions and more at hgo.org.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now back to Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
All right. This is something I've never heard of. Juvenile arthritis. It is for kids under 16, and we're talking about joint inflammation, swelling, pain, tenderness, all the kinds of arthritis that we old folks get. But this is for kids and teens, and this is Juvenile Arthritis Awareness Month. So we want to find out more about this. Joining us is Kristen Stubbs, Executive Director of the Arthritis Foundation of Houston and the Texas Gulf Coast office. So, Kristen, educate us. How many kids are we talking about?
Yeah. Well, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of children, and actually, it's not just teens. We have kids that we work with that have been diagnosed as young as 16 months, and some even earlier.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really, and unfortunately, there is so pediatric rheumatologists are the types of doctors that treat juvenile arthritis. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, it's very difficult for kids to be diagnosed because the regular, they present with swollen joints, red, stiff joints, sometimes hot to the touch. The symptoms come and go, so it's not a constant symptom. Your regular pediatrician typically, in a lot of cases, doesn't really know what it is.
Is it different than adult arthritis?
It's not. It's an autoimmune disease. So there are 100 different forms of arthritis. There are the kinds that most people are familiar with, which is osteoarthritis, that you get in your joints, and you hear knee replacements, hip replacements. That's typically OA, as we call it, and that's just the wear and tear of your joints as you age. If you've had a knee injury, ACL tear, meniscus tear, arthritis can build up in those joints. People who work a lot, like oil field workers, we see a lot of OA in oil field workers because they're constantly using their joints.
So I guess that's not what's affecting children.
So
right.
no,
so
but there are it's an autoimmune type of disease, just like rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, those types of arthritis. So it's autoimmune in kids. The immune system is, combating against your own body, and creates inflammation and pain in the joints.
So as a parent or a teacher, what do we look for when a kid complains and you want to say, oh, you're a kid?
Right.
Those are also such general,
Exactly.
you think growing pains.
Yeah, and that's why it's so hard to diagnose. In kids, if the condition is repeated all the time, like a joint will swell up, a knee will swell up, and then after a few days it'll go away, it'll be fine. But then maybe the next week it comes back, things like that. And really it's got to be doctor diagnosed. We are very fortunate in Houston that Texas Children's Hospital has the largest pediatric rheumatology department in the country. However, there are 9 states in here that do not have a pediatric rheumatologist.
Wow.
And juvenile arthritis is treated differently than adult arthritis.
I was going to say meloxicam, ibuprofen.
Right.
What do we do for it?
Right, exactly.
How do you treat that?
So there are medicines called biologics, which are injections. You've heard of Humira, Enbrel. Those treat the autoimmune types of arthritis, and
I'm
even
gonna
in
guess
children.
You're not a medical doctor, and people
I
should
am
always
not
check
exactly.
with their
That's-
medical
yes,
experts
thank
about
you,
any
yes.
of this. The problems of
Yeah.
it being undiagnosed, though, or not treated in young folks.
Yeah. The problem with that is if it's not treated, it can cause permanent joint damage. And that's serious. That could affect a child's entire life. If it's even if it's diagnosed late, there's that permanent joint damage that
Given that it's
happens.
autoimmune, and some autoimmune diseases can eventually sort of cure themselves. But is this something that a lot of kids take into adulthood?
Yeah, that's what we see anyway. I mean, it's not something that goes away. It does it as a child grows. It really sort of then becomes, rheumatoid arthritis or psoriatic or something like that. So, it pretty much, if they have it as a kid, they're going to have it throughout their whole life.
Are there any links to this being genetic?
Not really. We don't consider it genetic. We have families that one kid has it. They have, in fact, having dinner with a lady whose 5-year-old was diagnosed recently. She has 5 children, and none of the others have any symptoms whatsoever.
Before we run out of time, I do want to take back to a fact that we had talked about before, is the fact that when we get into adulthood too, that there are things we can do to help ourselves so that we don't end up. One of the things is weight loss, and this is a fascinating statistic. I'll let you introduce it.
Yeah, so weight is a really big contributing factor to joint pain. For every pound of weight,
single pound of weight
puts 10 pounds of pressure on your joints. So if you think about it, if you lose 1 pound, that's 10 pounds of pressure on your joints. So people who are overweight are very much more susceptible to arthritis.
So 5-10 pounds overweight
Absolutely.
is already causing and so when you get to much larger numbers
Yep.
of overweightness and into obesity, the pressure on the joints is insane.
It is. It's insane, and that's what wears that cartilage away, causes the pain.
You could fight this with your child with diet.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Exercise might be tough if they have arthritis.
So here's the thing. Motion. I always say motion is lotion. So the more you
I say that. Absolutely.
Exercise is key. Exercise, sleeping right, eating healthy, reducing stress. Those can all lead to joint pain and inflammation. But exercise, even though you're in pain, you don't want to get up and exercise. It creates fluid around your joints and lubricates those joints.
Where to go for more info?
Arthritis.org. We have the biggest library of arthritis information and resources in the world. And arthritis.org, where we have a helpline, 1-800-283-7800.
Love it. Kristen Stubbs is the executive director of the Arthritis Foundation, Houston, Texas, Gulf Coast office. Kristen, thank you for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of our show. We want to thank you for listening, engaging, chatting with us today on Hello Houston. We'll be back tomorrow with more conversations. This is News 88.7.
Thanks for listening to Hello Houston. Join us every Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. to talk all things Houston. The Hello Houston production team includes Garrett Bowman, William Menjivar, Jen Altide, Todd Holslander, and Jim Kovacic. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at HoustonPublicMedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Donations come in many forms: a monthly membership, a one-time gift, and that extra vehicle you no longer need. We take any kind of vehicle in any condition